We should be live. Welcome, everybody.
We made
Thank
it.
you for joining us. Yes, on this, I mean, at least in Chicago, it's a absolutely gorgeous Tuesday. It's the best weather ever, so I am not complaining.
The heat has finally broken here and it's like tolerable for a few days.
Yeah, that's how it feels here too. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Last week was brutal.
the past couple weeks have been indeed quite brutal. But so I'm just getting LinkedIn set up in here as well in case somebody would like to, comment on it, so we can get this going. But would you like, Anna, while I do this, tell about today's topic and get that going?
Sure. So, yes. So, today we are talking about imposter syndrome. So, imposter and how to work through it and when you're in an environment that you're unfamiliar with. And so I'll go ahead and define that. If I can get my Word document on my second screen to pull over here. I tried to be prepared and it just likes to mess with me. So, imposter syndrome, I wrote down the definition. It's when you feel like everybody knows what's going on but you're there by mistake, and surely they're going to find out that you shouldn't have ever been picked to be there, and you're going to be outed and you're going to have to leave. So, this is very common when you're in a new work environment, especially if you're like a first generation professional. It's also very common if you're first generation university, and you don't even have to be first generation, you can still experience this, but it's very prevalent among these groups. I know I certainly had it in grad school. That's the first time I heard somebody use the term, and it's correlated very strongly with anxiety and depression. And I tried to look before we did this, like, what is the relationship with workplace outcomes? And I didn't find any research on that directly. But anxiety and depression, you're not doing your best work when you have those, right? And that is also related to, having more absenteeism, more sick leave, and all of those things. So, we always care about the human side. The IO in me always brings up the why should I care even if I'm a jerk side. So that's what it is. Well, I'll pause there before I say anything else. Do you have any?
No, I think you're doing fine. I think it's a perfect, like, the way it's defined is how it feels, right? Like, I know at some point, I believe everybody at some point has felt like an imposter, right? Somewhere,
Yeah.
somehow, in some way, right? Um, I think the first time I heard that term was not that long ago. It was probably a few years ago, and I was like, "Oh, that's what that is.
That's what it is. Yeah.
That's
It's
what
one of
it
those, yeah, you're
is."
right. It's one of those things that everybody experiences. Like some
Yeah,
are more than other, like it's more consistent than others. But I
yeah,
think it's pretty at some point in your life, you've probably
yeah,
experienced it. Even
yeah.
if you're, we always talk about marginalization versus, the white man, right? And even if you're a white man, you can't
Oh, I'm
experience.
sure they feel it too.
Yeah, you can experience. I mean, my first research study was on white men from low income backgrounds, and they talked about it a lot when they were in more higher class environments.
Yeah.
Um, so I think most people who follow me know I do research on the unwritten rules of work. And so when I hear imposter syndrome, the first thing I think of is grad school. Because that's where I was like, what is going on?
What is going on?
And then two, I think imposter syndrome, when people talk to you about this, like when a lot of my mentors would talk to me about it, they'd be like, it's okay, everybody here is just faking it. Everybody here is just faking it. And the relief with imposter syndrome is when you finally meet people who disclose they don't know what's going on either.
Yes.
But with the unwritten rules of work, I have a conflicting feeling about this because I think that's the case sometimes. And then there are other times when there really are unwritten rules that most people in the environment know because the rules align with their culture. And if you're new and
Okay.
you're from a culture that doesn't align with that organization, then there very well could be unwritten rules that you do not know. Then that does not mean you are doomed to fail, but it can heighten the anxiety and it can just add obstacles along the way. And so that is why I'm very passionate about working with leaders about being more transparent and thinking of what they are
Yeah.
and being transparent about them. And ironically, I feel like in corporate and more white collar, it's an unwritten rule to posture, to fake it.
Sorry, something happened. Did you see that?
I did. I was like, it took her aback.
I don't know what happened with my desk. I'm so sorry. Well, see, this should have happened next week because it's humor and the whole point. That would have been the
Yeah,
first.
I said it, and it was like, "Don't say that. Don't say that."
I'm so sorry. I don't even know what happened. That was funny. We'll keep this clip for next week. We'll be fine. I'm so sorry. That was very weird. Um, it's funny you're saying that, right? And I wonder if, going back, like you were talking now about the unwritten rules, right? And for some reason, I think also because of recent events that I've learned of some friends who have quit their jobs because they can't deal with it and blah blah blah. And I wonder if the issue is that either there are new unwritten rules that we were not before the pandemic, there were some, and now there are different ones where the higher ranks are just, which we know they are very plain and broadcasted, but it's we don't talk about that there needs to be a shift. We pretend that this is not happening. We pretend that this is not, we keep going. We say that we want to change. We say we want all these things, but we can't really talk about it. We can't really do anything about it. And we do, it's, it, it's interesting because I've applied for jobs, last year, and whenever they learned that I was a inspirational, motivational speaker, that my passion is to develop and growth, like, promote like development and growth. The first thing they did when they learned that, it was an immediate no, because it was always a question, well, but how? But why would that? How is that part of? How do you incorporate that? I was like, I'm sorry, you do not want your team that is completely crumbling right now to not be motivated, to not be inspired.
They didn't see the
I
trans.
don't understand. Yeah. And it was
Threat.
funny because up until the point that they brought that up, I was going very well because I am very good. I mean, I still am very good at that job, not just because I'm not doing it, it doesn't mean, very good at that
For a
job.
long time, yeah.
Yeah, but the moment that happened, and today I was talking to the person who quit, and I realized I was like, it it's interesting because, and now you said that, and they both just click what I thought earlier and what you just said of like, oh, so they say they want people to do that, but they're trying to hire people from the older generation because they think that we will be part of that. An older generation, I'm talking about age, but the people that were leaders before the pandemic,
Right.
to
So more
kind of bring,
not about like an older age generation, about like people of the previous mindset.
correct, of being like, okay, I need you here because I need you to trying to install on the mentality that we had before. You cannot be part of the change. You cannot be part of the team of people that want to make the change.
So you're talking about like, so I think what you're saying makes sense. So just clarifying. So like recently, I'm sure you saw that Dell told all their employees, if you don't come into the office, you're not eligible for promotion. And employees
Yes.
said, "Cool, bye. We don't care." Like that, they stayed
Yeah, that's
home.
fine.
They would
Yeah.
rather stay home than be promoted. So, from what to me, what I hear you saying is that is Dell saying the people who adhere to the previous mindset pre-pandemic, that's who we'll reward, and that's who's going to be leadership.
Yes.
Okay, so I think that's
Yeah.
very. I mean, and they're not the only ones doing that, and that's
Yeah.
it was just that
Yeah.
response that got, like, national news of them being like, "We would rather" my brother's wife, my new sister-in-law, her company announced that a few months ago, but they're not as big as Dell. So and she has to live on my brother's in the military, like, they don't decide where they live. Like, the
Yeah.
military decides where they
Yeah.
live,
Yeah.
so she's a very successful software engineer, so she was upset to hear that, right?
Yeah.
Because she would like to be able to grow with this company. She's been with them for like 6 years, but they got bought out, and this is what the new company is
Isn't that crazy though? Is it really what it makes or break you? The fact that you can go into the office or not? or that, you know what I'm saying? It's just like,
Like for the employees or for the
yeah, no, the concept, it's just mind blowing to me. Like that, you know what I'm saying? Like that, and we all know why they want, you back in the office. That's not, but it just amazes me how they are fighting. How do you say, teeth and whatever, tooth and
tooth and
something,
nail?
isn't that an yes,
Tooth and nail, yeah.
to keep that, and I'm like, what? I don't
And
understand.
also, so about I wonder if people feel less imposter syndrome because I have asked my TikTok followers, why how do you feel like there are less unwritten rules when you're at home versus at work? Like what changed?
Yeah,
And I get some really interesting responses. And I asked specifically recently, like a week or so ago, what is it about pre-COVID, post-COVID? And some people say just my social meter died because I was alone for so long that 5 days in person all
yeah,
the time is just very overstimulating now. But a lot of them just say, I did not realize how much of that I put up with, how much of having to code switch constantly, how much labor I had to do that wasn't even my job that
yes,
I don't have to do when I'm at home. Now, there can still be these harms and imposter syndrome at home, but I think it is
mhm,
different because I think it's different when, I turn on this camera and this is how much I have to do,
yeah.
right? Versus all the time in an office. But
Yeah,
there
and being
also,
constantly monitored, right? Like, because that's what
right.
it is. There's all,
Well,
you
and
don't know who's
you're
gonna walk
getting
in.
people still are monitored online. I mean, we saw Wells Fargo recently laid off a lot of people for using mouse jigglers. Did you
Yeah,
see
no,
that?
but I know, but it's like, it's just this,
So
that you're being
monitoring
monitored
the
by the,
appearance.
yeah, like you can't, like, exactly, right? Like for example, online, there's always um, I don't know, the spell check, right? If you're typing something,
Mhm.
there's less of, you don't necessarily need to have your camera on all the time, or you know what I'm saying, like even if they obligate you to do so, you can, but there's not that social pressure, or that idea that you do need to be, at performing at whatever
Mhm.
level that you need to perform. And I'm performing, I mean, not the work itself, putting a performance, you're
Right.
putting
The part that's
a
not in
show.
your job description, but is expected, and that's what I call the unwritten
Yes,
rules.
correct, yeah,
And it is worse for some people than others. If you're disabled, right? If you're physically disabled, you've talked about that. Like it's harder to physically get to the office sometimes.
yeah.
If you're a woman, it's not written that you have to have makeup on, but you are going to be asked if you're tired and what's going on and not looked at as authoritatively or told that you look really young, you know, without it. And if you're a woman of color, there's a lot of hair policing. If you're a man of color, there's a lot of hair policing. And I mean, even for just again the average white guy, there's your facial hair, right? There's just
Oh
all
my goodness.
things that people are like, you know what? I am still a really good accountant when I don't do that, or I'm still a really good software engineer when I
I
don't do
didn't have time because I'm working, 16 hours a day. When I get home, the last thing I want to do is actually shave, like, or anything, right? Like, for me, like, and that's the thing. Like you were saying this, I remember I was on this, so in hotels, for those who don't know, my experience has mainly been in hotels. And right before a shift, there's the 9 a.m. call, like the 9 a.m. Meeting, which call a stand up or whatever. And it's a group of other managers. We, gather together and in a circle pretty much. And we talk about what's going on in the day, something that happened the night before. And there was one of the few last ones that I joined. There was this young gentleman that was there, and his hair had grew a little bit longer since, I think he was on vacation or something, and he hadn't had time to get a haircut. And then one day he showed up with a haircut, and the general manager was like, "Oh, you look so good. I thought I was going to have to cut your hair like myself." And I was like, "I'm sorry." And I felt for him, for the young kid, right? Because I saw that he noticed that was inappropriate, right? But he didn't feel like he had a voice to respond to that, right? Again, because one, I he's Latino. That's one thing. But also that whole thing of like, can I say something, right? That can come up from the imposter syndrome is like, did I deserve my place? Is the fact that my hair
Was
not
everyone thinking this all week and nobody said anything? Is this gonna
correct?
be forever? Yeah.
So I think that there is some, yeah, it's just the whole 10 hours thing, right? Like, um, in hotels specifically too, like on any job that you have shifts that is 24 hours. So hotels, you have either 7 a.m. mainly, right? 7 a.m. a 3 p.m. shift. So 7 to 3:30s, because by the way, in hotels you do not get an hour break. You get 30 minutes, right? So you work for 8 hours on your feet and you only get 30-minute break. You would get 8 hours working with people at your face and you only get a 30-minute break. But you get, your 7 a.m. to 3:30, 3 to 11:30. And there's something we call back to back, which is, if you work a PM shift and you come back for AM shift. Now, before the law was 8 hours. You had to have 8 hours between two shifts to make it, I couldn't schedule somebody to do anything less than that, right? Now the law extended to 10 hours. But it's still, for you to be, for a leader, for example, that doesn't exist because sometimes you have to do multiple like that. You have to stay in the office for 12, 14 hours and come back the same time the next day. That doesn't exist for managers. It's just for hourlies, that law. But here's the thing. 10 hours does not give you enough time because if you leave an hour away, that's an hour just to get home. And then you still have to shower, you have to eat, you have to get ready for the next day. And then there's no way that you're going to get 8 hours of sleep at this point. Then you have to wake up. If you haven't showered the night before, if you would like to shower again in the morning, which there's nothing wrong with that, you should be able to shower in the morning as well if you would like. And then for the man to shave if they would like, women to put makeup on because they have to, and then get something to eat, how is it 10 hours even? You can't.
Well,
I expect people to be presentable. Like, I don't understand.
Or what they define as presentable, right? So I think it's a time cost with the commute, or I don't think I know because people are being very vocal about why they don't want to come in. There's also some estimates, and I don't remember where, so don't quote me exactly. That take this with a grain of salt. That commuting costs people say that it takes up about 20% extra cost. I don't know if they're factoring their time in that, but there is a cost because a lot of places also don't pay for your parking.
Oh yeah, no, especially if you're hourly. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's the gas, wear and tear on the vehicle, or I use public transportation in the DC area, and so that's less of a cost for me. So those are also some of the things that with all this inflation, people are like, I'm cutting costs everywhere I can.
Yeah.
Now, personally, for me, I do like that I have a client right now who wants me to be, they said once a week. It's really been like once every 2 weeks. And I really enjoy that because I'm like, okay, I need some human interaction.
Yeah, of course.
The irony, I think I get less actual work done on those days.
100%.
Because I'm talking to everybody in the office and but I'm sure building those relationships makes the rest of the week when we're virtual go smoother and more enjoyable.
Yeah.
So, but it's a very reasonable commute. It's 2 metro stops from me. So I'm like, no problem.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost me a lot of money. So depending on where you are, I'm in a very privileged position being in one of the 3 cities in the US that has decent public transportation.
Trust me, that's why I wanted to come back to Chicago because, it's good. It's very good public transportation. I really like it. And it's funny because I remember when I left Chicago in 2017, they had raised the price for the unlimited monthly pass for Ventra.
They just raised the prices here too.
Yeah, but they had raised for, I believe when I left, was either 100 or 125. But when I started back in 2012, when I first moved to Chicago, it was $75. They moved back to 75. I thought it was going to be closer to 100 at this point, with the inflation, but they lowered to 75.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so it's the same price as I used to pay 12 years ago. It's the exact same price.
That's
So I
great.
don't know if during the pandemic they lowered it because, nobody was taking public transportation at that point.
Right.
And then they probably try to raise at some point and people are like, no, we're not doing that. and,
Yeah,
then, and then they capped it. But I mean, it is a good thing. But sorry, we sidetracked again as we
as we always do.
really always do.
So so we've talked about what it is, we've talked about different situations, we've talked about how this interplays with people not wanting to go back into the office. So what are some tips to handle this, either for the person experiencing it or for a leader who may not be aware that this is what the employees have or is aware?
I would say for a leader, first make that very noticeable. I think that communicating, right? Like, hey, I felt like I had no idea what I was doing when I first started. I think especially for department heads, when they first get to that position, you don't know what you're doing. You don't. There's no way this is your first time doing it, there's absolutely no way that you're gonna know what to do. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be there, right? Like and I think that that's what the imposter syndrome comes from is like, I don't know, so I shouldn't be doing this job. Those are different things. You don't know and you shouldn't be there are very different things, right?
And sometimes you may not know. I've actually had some leaders say this to me, and I appreciate it. Because you're new, I want to hear your perspective because I don't want to hear what somebody who's already in this culture said. I want you to
Yeah.
tell me what's obvious right away to you and
Yeah.
what isn't, as someone who's been brand new. It brings in that fresh perspective.
Yeah. I think that the people that I have struggled with the most, um, coming to that, absolutely women, right? Like women that are not the ones that are trying to become a supervisor or manager, but the ones that are in the positions of assistant managers. They're the ones that struggle with the most. Men tend, from my experience, of course, I haven't dealt with every single person in this world, but the ones that I deal with, um, most of them were okay. Maybe they didn't show it as much, that they didn't feel like they belong in there. But I think because there is that expectation that you will know what to do. I think that is the thing that you need to, from both sides, right? Like as somebody coming into a new position, into a new environment, uh, I have not only moved countries, I have moved states many times, I've moved companies many times, and I don't think I've ever felt like, I think the first time, and it's very interesting actually, now that I'm thinking about it, the very first time that I truly felt imposter syndrome is what it it started a downhill fall for me in my career of, I'm sorry, not just my career, in my entire life, where I felt like I was worthless. I felt like I had no idea what I was doing, and I had nobody to tell me that that was not true. And because of that,
Hmm.
my once very strong confidence in myself and figuring out in my resilience and a lot of things were completely crushed. And that's when I started developing chronic anxiety. I didn't have panic attacks at that point, but I would cry every day before going to work. It was horrible. It really turned my life upside down, and I've never been more miserable than that full year. And all because I was feeling like an imposter. And I was like, why the heck? Why am I here? Nobody cares. Like nobody. I'm terrible at this, and I didn't have a single person that would tell me, "No, you're fine." It's your boss that doesn't know how to help you. You're asking for help. This is your first time at this job, and he should be helping you, not telling you that you should figure it out.
Was this the same job you mentioned last week where when you left, one of the coworkers who replaced you reached out and said the same thing was happening to them
Yeah.
then?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
All right. Sorry, I'm
Exactly. So,
putting together the dots. I'm so sorry that
yeah.
happened.
No, I was, yeah, I was, and it's funny because today I was talking to this friend of mine who quit, and we were talking. I said, I was actually talking on our podcast the other week about, because she's like, oh, should I do an exit interview and everything? I was like, I am of the opinion that it really won't matter, because I know that. I said, Anna had a very different perspective on that we should try, that we should not, not do it. But I personally have not seen a benefit from that, right? Because in the beginning, you felt like, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do the right thing. And I told her, I was like, remember the last job you left? All the things you said about the one person that made you leave. They told you they already knew about it. That person's still there. That
Just
person's still there. It's been, yeah, the person who destroyed my life, literally destroyed me in my life for like, of course I allow him to, because, I didn't know any better, but it's true. He did it. He went to become, I don't know what, like he's still growing on his career. And so it's like, why am I wasting my energy and giving them all of these pieces of information? Because even though HR really cares, and some leaders may really care, at the end of the day, again, they don't want people that want to make changes. They want people that will just follow the rules and do the things that they need to be doing. They just need people that perform their jobs. So, and I don't know why I started this conversation about this whole different side talk, but it was definitely regarding, well,
well,
because of the imposter syndrome, right? Like how
yeah, like
mine
what can we
started.
do to help with this? And then you talk it sounds like you're giving an example of when they didn't.
Correct. When he doesn't, when nobody's there to help you through this. So, and then I was saying that, I make it my mission with especially Black women. Oh my God. I grabbed them and I was like, you gotta like stand up. Like you have to like own your power. Like stop this. Like I need you to, I hired you. Most of them, most of the people, when I start a job, I hire, usually I get to a place and it's falling apart. So I have to rehire everybody. It's a fact. It's a
And
fact. So, and I usually hire really strong. I don't care if they don't know how to do the job necessarily. I need people that are strong and people that are willing to learn, people like that want to grow, because I can develop them. Right? I can develop them.
you
I
can
can
train
make
tasks, you can't train resilience.
correct.
Yeah.
And then and it's funny how they often tell me, they're like, you're the first person that I've ever believed in me. I was like, but that's the point. We need to believe in each other. Like because otherwise we're all going to be in this environment where we don't think that we're powerful enough to say what we want to say, that we belong enough to say what we want to say. We would always be expected to be something that we're not. And when I think that moment in my life, right, it really opened myself to understanding the future, that if I don't think I belong in a place, it's not so much of my problem, is the problem that the place doesn't make any effort to make me belong there. And therefore I no longer care. And so I leave. Like I have come to agreement with that. I'm not suggesting anybody quit their jobs, but I'm saying that it gets to a point that if you don't feel like you belong in the place, then there's nobody you can turn to that they are on the same level, like mental, like, you know what I'm saying? Like that they agree with some of the things. If every time you say there's something wrong, they say that no, there's nothing wrong, or this is just how things are, this is not the place for you. I can promise you, one person will not make such a big difference in a corporation. And that I can promise. No matter, because everybody has at that point been brainwashed in a sense. Um, but sorry, not brainwashed, but they have been made to believe that that is the only way to be done in that place.
That's the way.
So yeah, so you have to have, just one person won't do. I've tried, believe me, I've tried that, and it's it's not it's not worth it, and it's not okay for one person to take on that responsibility, because I can say this: you're not going to win, and you're going to feel like you're an imposter, that you don't have all of that. You know what I'm saying? That you're not as good as you thought you were because you couldn't change the culture of that place. But one person, and as you can't change the culture of the
It sounds like
place.
we're talking about when people evaluate their whole worth based on
Correct.
an external
Direct,
organization.
yeah,
That's always dangerous.
100%.
I wanna is now a good time to
Please, I saw you taking notes. I was waiting for it.
I don't want to interrupt. So actually
Oh,
I
I
learned
got
that's
you.
an active listening technique. I learned that maybe 10 years ago, of like, so that you can continuously listen to someone, write it down so that you're not still thinking, don't forget that you're going to say this. And anybody who's followed us knows that my memory is garbage. So I'm
You are
transparent.
fine.
I'm transparent about that. I have suffered a traumatic brain injury. So my memory has it's like my long-term memory is fine, but my short term, I'm like, can get a little spazzed out, especially when I'm
It's
tired.
okay.
So, a couple things. One, most recently you were talking about the toxic leader being promoted, and people talk about this a lot because they're like, this person was so harmful, and the organization rewards it. And in those cases, I agree with you that it's not worth it. You can't evaluate your internal worth based on the organization, and that's really hard to do when you're a really passionate person about what you do. As an
Yeah.
IO, like, I hate it when I see those videos of people, like, tearfully turning in their resignation or talking about the actual grief that comes about what you thought was a dream job or something you thought would be really meaningful work.
The grief, the
Right?
grief.
It actually gets the grief, and I know that sounds crazy and so American, but with how, like, obsessed with work we are, but
No,
it
but it's
the
true.
grief when, like, because you prepped for years, whether you went to college or not, you prepped for years, you put a lot of work into this and you really tried, and that is a loss. And it is something I would say, if you're not sure, is the problem me or is it the organization? I think you should look at what they reward. Because if up the chain, it's narcissism or it's um what is it? What is it? It's sadism rewarded, sadistic leadership. That's what I was thinking. Then
Yeah.
GTFO, if that is what they consider leadership, there's no point.
Yeah.
And I say that very intentionally knowing we're on LinkedIn. And I mean, if you're going to say this is nobody wants to work anymore, you need to look at that because we know from decades of research, and I've talked about on here that we've had different perceptions of what leadership is over time. We know that what we think a leader is and what is actually measured as effective are usually different things. And what we think a leader is often rooted in stereotypes.
Yeah.
So there's that. If you think leadership is narcissism and sadism, yeah, nobody wants to work for you. So the other thing
That's why you can't keep anybody.
yes, the other thing is I noticed that you talked about how women especially have a very hard time with imposter syndrome. You also brought up um, Black women, which I'm not sure you didn't talk about that long, but I'm assuming because I know you, but correct me if I'm wrong, you're talking how they get belittled a lot at work.
I think it's more, I think with them, and with women in general, it's a personal thing. They think that they are not worthy. And because they think they are unworthy, they don't feel like they can say something, or then they don't, you know what I'm saying? I think that it's a
Internalize misogynoir
correct.
specific misogyny towards Black women. So that is very real. Also, I also did do a video this week on my own TikTok on an unwritten rule of work is to not be perceived as aggressive, and Black women in particular get
Oh,
stereotyped as
it's
aggressive when they disagree at all. So you probably did have a lot of people who are afraid to speak up because any dissent from a Black woman is she's aggressive.
yeah.
So what, but you said this was just your personal experience, but you've noticed women have a really hard time with it. But I just wanted to add, as I do on
Please.
the random knowledge that, my brothers like say thank you for that useless piece of trivia. But their research shows that so when women apply to jobs when they have 100% of the qualifications,
Oh,
men apply to
that's
jobs
for them.
when they have 60% of the qualifications. And that's not saying men are wrong, but we raise boys from the beginning that confidence is okay. And we raise little girls that they need to not be bossy. And this that doesn't just go away when you become an adult and start working. Like, you don't condition someone for over 2 decades. Don't be bossy. And then they're just going to become a leader. So that is a very real thing. That's not just your experience, though, of course, your experience is valid, of how we condition people
Yeah.
impacts these as well. So there's the external stereotype and there's the internalized messaging. that we hear.
100%. And you said, and I think we had this conversation. I don't know if it was live or we was offline of how being confident it's in
Mhm.
women is always seen as arrogance,
Mhm.
right? Confident women are seen as arrogant, and it's funny because you know I I've always been very confident in myself, in my abilities to figure it out something. I've always known I was very smart and very witty and very, capable. I've always thought that of myself up into something external made me feel like I didn't. And then
Mhm.
I couldn't be that smart, that I couldn't say it like that. And because they said that I couldn't, I started doubting my own abilities, right? Because I remember like growing up, I've always been very outspoken, very resilient, very brave. Um, just a person, right? Like with intentions and grit. And because the world started to tell me that that was not good, that I was like that, I started to believe that I wasn't good. And if I'm not good the way that I am, then I should not be in whatever environment I should be. Right.
Mm.
There's like that self worth was like, if I don't feel like I'm good enough in any scenario, I'm always going to feel like I don't belong in any position that is somewhat qualified per se. And I'm not talking about tasks, right? But like a leader position or an Instagrammer, right? Like or somebody like an influence, somebody that has the difference between successful people and people who are not successful and people who stays is that confidence to be like, you know what, I stand up for myself, right? Like even if um they don't feel like that the world sees that from them, but they feel that they are confident enough and they will uh I think I did a video the other day and you even commented. I was like, oh my God, you're recording in public. And that's the thing. I'm freaking shaky. I'm constantly looking around to see who's listening to me. You know what I'm saying? But there's a difference of being like, you know what? I will continue to do this, right? Like, because that's how you build confidence. You build confidence by doing it, by just practicing, by doing it enough that you're confident that you can do it. And but the world is so eagerly to always tell us that we can't, right? That you should not speak so loudly. The amount of times I've been in meetings that they say, maybe not so much. Or even as a child, I remember actually my my keynote actually starts with, I remember the first time I was told that I was too much. I was in the car, my mom looked at me and she said, I said something which I truly don't believe, I don't remember what it was, but what a 7-year-old can say to really trigger this kind of response, I do not know. But she looked at me and she said, you know what? You need to expect less from us because we are all mere mortals. We're not like you. And the way she meant to say that, and I do not know if I see that's the thing. I don't know if she was somewhat just completely vicious or she had the intention to say, Raquel, you are way above us in a way. Like
Because it almost
you
sounds like
choose,
a compliment. Yeah.
yes. But imagine as a child, you've seen that, you're like, you cannot expect too much. Children don't take it as compliments. Children automatically will take it as something is wrong with me. I'm making my mother upset. I'm making others upset. There's something wrong with me. And that's how we start making people feel like they're wrong about themselves. When we start telling them whoever they are, it's not okay. Right? In whatever regard. You are too pretty. You can't say that you're pretty. You are too pretty. You can't look too pretty. Like today, a very clear example. Today, I wanted to put this shirt. I was like, you know what? There is a little bit of privilege. Would this be appropriate? And I was like, I can't believe
I
this.
wore that on my shoulders. I was like, was this okay? And I was like, you know what?
And
Whatever.
I'm like, but because I've been conditioned that showing cleavage, and I apologize to the world, unfortunately, that I have these since birth, and I can't control them. They grew with me. I can't. You know what I'm saying? I'm not gonna be, but like, you can't because it's distracting. That's what I'm saying. You feel so ashamed about who you
Yeah,
are.
I've had to take notes the whole time, Raquel, because I'm distracted by your cleavage.
Well,
Sorry,
I
I didn't throw
apologize.
you off. I just saw an opportunity and I took it.
But you see what I'm saying? Like, so from the very beginning, especially women, right? Like, well, you are too provocative. You can't, everything that you do, it's not okay unless you are this. very typical. I've been watching Bridgerton lately, which is the first time I've watched the season. And
Yep.
the more I watched it, the more I was like, holy crap. But if we think that this is just something that happened, we're completely wrong. Like the very first season where, what's her name? Daphne, right? She's
Mhm.
called the diamond because she's the mirror, because she's pure, because she's pretty, because she's this, because, and I'm like, yeah. And then when I remember me growing up looking at those, any video or any, and it's so bad that until today, whenever I watch anything online, any or whatever, I'm always like, oh, I wish I was more like her. I
Oh.
wish I were. Because, but in a sense, it's like, because I am the loud, I am the very expressive, I'm a very expansive. And especially in Brazil, where the culture is all about image, right? I've never been the body type of a Brazilian woman. I've never been, the physical parts of a Brazilian, even the attitudes of Brazilian, what it's expected in there. And so it's like I've always felt like I was out of place. So I think that's why whenever we don't talk about imposter syndrome, it's like I've always felt like an imposter anywhere. I,
Mhm.
college, I don't even know how I graduated, and I graduated with really high. Like the way it was just there was one class was revenue management. I remember there was this that goddamn professor. He was out to get me because I was never in class because it was so common sense to me that I didn't feel like I need to take class, and I didn't because I passed like with flying colors. But he was after me, and he like when you have to like the final task was all of us would have to like he divided us in groups, and I remember it was like groups of 6 or whatever, and then of course I was not picked by a group because I've never belonged to any cliques. So I've always been the one to like, oh, can I, partner with you? But I was with all the rejects so much that everybody has 6 people and my group have 4. And he would not let us merge with other people. He's like, no, the max is. I was like, okay, I carried the entire goddamn thing. And all we had to do was, we had to make the hotel profit. Like he would give a scenario, we had to take action, and it will profit or not. And week after week, he's like, well, I guess their group is again in the first place. Well, again, and everybody's just looking at us. And I remember people are like, what do you do? It's like, it's fucking common sense. What are you talking about? Like, it's just fucking common sense. There's high demand, you raise the price. There's low demand, you lower the price. Like, it's just fucking common sense. And I remember we finished in first place, and everybody's just staring at us. And I'm like, but the fact that he made me feel like I couldn't do that, or that I felt as I was winning that there's something wrong, that it was just luck. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of that.
So yeah, and that is part of stereotypes, and that's part of culture, because different cultures tell you different things that are acceptable.
Yes.
Because and I think I mentioned last week, or no, I think that was just a conversation with my sister this weekend. Like, for example, in the US, if a man shows up in a skirt, people are going to freak out, and everybody's going to
Yes.
assume they're trans or whatever, and it can even be a violent situation. While there are many cultures in the world, in Asia and indigenous tribes here, and even Scotland, where like warriors wear skirts or royalty wears skirts. Like, so what we consider normal is all an illusion. It's all what's
Yes.
around us. And that includes how we set, like here, that we expect girls not to be bossy, but boys have to be cocky, right? Or at least that's how they're conditioned, because
Do not take a no for an answer.
not take no for an answer, to not be rejected, to not say you don't know what you're doing, and that ranges from being at work to sexual relationships, everything.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
there's research on that men are just supposed to know, and if you don't, then you lose your man card. And it's one of those things that's harmful to everybody.
Uh-huh.
But I noticed that couple things is, one of the things that I talk about, or my main thing, is the unwritten rules of work for people from low income backgrounds. And I talked about how one of the unwritten rules when you're navigating imposter syndrome is that everybody is faking it to an extent.
Yes.
And I think that's really hard for people from working class backgrounds to wrap their minds around, because you can't do that with a lot of blue collar or service work. Like you can't fake clean up.
Right?
You can't fake clean a hotel room. You can't fake check somebody in. You can't fake
Correct.
do construction, and you can't reframe a wall falling down.
Correct.
Right. So I think one, it's not part of the work that they've been around, but it's also there are two of the really big working class values in working class America is work ethic and humility. And so what it doesn't feel humble to posture or to talk about how great you are. And in some ways, that's good because then you're really authentic, but it harms these people as they're moving up in these different work environments and their performance ratings, etc. And that intersects
Mm,
with those other identities, with if you're working class and being a woman and being a person of color, all of these things pile on top. And
yeah.
so I know that I have always struggled with perceptions of what is humility, because where I grew up in my culture, which was very religious and, blue collar area, rural, I remember one of my friends telling me, who was in a different town, like, Anna, do you realize that humility isn't thinking less of yourself? It's thinking of yourself less. And that
Mm.
always stuck with me. And I've struggled with that because, and I was, before we did this, I looked up some things on imposter syndrome. I was looking for org outcomes and I didn't find any. But I found a Harvard Business Review article that talked about how imposter syndrome can be advantageous because it shows signs of being other oriented. And I thought you'd get a kick out of that because I had mixed feelings,
Yeah. I do
mostly,
too.
mostly annoyed, negative feelings
Yeah.
because these cultures that I've just talked about, these things that make you feel like an imposter, working class, woman, person of color, all of those are more communal cultures where you focus on the other and sharing resources and being a team. And that's another unwritten rule of work for my research is the shift to individualism and independent values, and how hard that is for women, for people of color, for people from working class backgrounds.
Yeah.
And so, and I don't know the people behind the article, I'm not going to assign intent, but I was like, instead of what if people who are other oriented feel like imposters in your organization, they're not, your organization does not promote teamwork. It promotes individualism. Now, and then I also think of your work where you're like, you can't let external factors, you're the only one who's in charge of you. But I think you can still have that and value community and community work.
100%. I think that there's I agree with what your friend told you when you when you should explain that to you. But to me, I think also being humble, it's just not thinking that you're better than anybody else. It's not
Mhm.
that you're not good. It's not that, and I think that that is the issue that we face as society in general, is the fact that just because I think I'm good doesn't mean that I think that I'm better than you. And I try to, so this is something I teach a lot about it too, is that I can be good, and that doesn't mean that I think I'm better than you. I can believe that I am great at what I do, and that does not mean that I believe that you are worse than me.
Mhm.
Because it's never about me in relationship to you. It's always me in relationship to myself. I
Mhm.
think I'm good regardless of what your status are, regardless of your abilities, regardless of who you are. I am me before I am beyond, I am before I am anything else, right? Like I am me. So if you can establish this first and you say, I am good, and that's where the whole part of like worthiness of unworthiness, that nobody feels like they're worthy at all. There's a whole movement about this, right? About being worthy and people feeling unworthy, is because we always value evaluating ourselves in relationship to another, always in relationship to somebody else. And we are a society, and we should be, right? Like we should be reflected, like that's how we solidify who we are. I can guarantee you that 99% of the things that you believe about yourself, they are your beliefs because you accepted them, but they were never meant for you to accept them as yourself, right? The whole thing
Right,
about,
that's the inner child, right? That's what you learned
yes,
being when you were little
correct.
and impressionable, and you have to unlearn some of that as an adult.
Like that you are, you instead of, oh, you did something silly, that you're stupid, that you did something that it was bad, and you did something bad, and you are bad, right? So there's a lot of these beliefs.
Accountability versus shame. Accountability is saying what I did was bad, and shame is saying I am bad because I
I
did.
am bad. And as we grew up Catholics, we understand this as well. Of the shame and the guilt. So I think that, and that is something that, I consider myself to be humble, right? I do. I really do. I don't think I'm better than anybody else. I really don't.
No, you don't. You
But
don't.
again,
I can vouch for you on that.
but you see what I'm saying? But I don't think that because of that, I need to level myself to whatever other people feel about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? Like I posted this the other day, which is that the only people that think that you are arrogant, that you feel like not sorry, because arrogance is something completely different. But anybody that thinks that you feel like that, say that you're being confident, right? So if I'm in being confident, you tell me like, oh, you're just full of yourself. I was like, no, it's because you are very less of yourself. I'm not full of
Right.
myself.
That gap is that you are insecure more, and so humility isn't thinking less of yourself. It's not thinking more of yourself either. It's just accepting who you are. And so if there's a
Yeah.
gap, that other person, and you are confident in that, no, I know my abilities and I don't think I'm better than you, then that person likely thinks less of themselves.
So, and that's the
And that's
thing. And but that's yeah, and that's where I believe most of the imposter syndrome comes from, right? The idea that, I because you're always in relation to somebody else, but you don't know what the other person is doing. So if you are just, what, I'm doing the very best I can with what I have, right? I'm doing the best that I can at this moment with what I have. My dad always said this. One time I remember I was very young, and I said something like, well, if I knew this, I would have done that. He's like, but if you knew that, of course you wouldn't have done it. Like, of course. Like, he's like, he always said this to me, you can never evaluate a decision that you made in the future, right? Like today, I cannot look back on things that I've done because I know that when I did the best decision I could with what I had.
Mm-hmm.
Would I know what that was? We never know. Life is a consistent gambling. You truly never know what you're going to say is going to do, what your actions are going to do. You can try to understand and predict by looking at past results, by looking at other people's experiences, but you truly don't know. You don't. Every single thing we do is unpredictable. Like, again, there's data that can say, oh yeah, this is what is going to happen, but we don't know if this is really going to happen this time.
Oh,
You know what
well, we
I'm
all learned
saying? Like,
that with COVID, right?
yeah. So it's like we need to understand that, like, it's okay to not know. And that's the humble part too, right? Like, I'm humble because I don't think I'm better than you. So I don't have an issue at telling you that I don't know.
And that's also empathy too, because, sympathy is pitying someone, but empathy is sitting in it with them. And
Yeah.
so I think I had one of the first note I jotted down today was when you were talking about when I said, what can leaders do? Is you didn't say it, but what you started was with sharing examples, showing that you didn't always know either. And that's vulnerability. And vulnerability, we know from research that actually Brene Brown did this research. And I know people have mixed feelings about her, but she's done a lot of research on this. That vulnerability is required for courage.
Oh, 100%.
It's an absolute precedent of it takes vulnerability to have the courage to say, I didn't always know how to do this, and this is how I learned. And that's how we make unwritten rules written, right?
Yeah.
Because while it doesn't mean that you're incompetent, it shows the learning process. And that's, whenever I go into organizations, I do a needs analysis. Where are they at? Where do they want to be? And then I develop the plan for how are we going to fill that gap. So think of it that way. Think of it like a needs analysis. Like, I'm here now. I wasn't always, this is how I filled the gap. And that's what the professional development for your people needs to be. That's what leadership looks like for addressing for some of these imposter syndrome situations. There was something else I was going to say about that, but I don't quite remember. But I know that we are getting close to time, and I do have something I want to say that is
Yes, please.
not profound, but I gotta say it.
Say it.
You said you were always told you were too much.
Always.
I always got that too, and who I got it from the most was my childhood priest at one point. Literally every time he saw me, he would say, "You are too much."
Oh,
Every time. It was that, and he would be mad I wasn't smiling. Over and over and over, every Sunday or whatever other day we were there for years. And finally, my mom got like a birthday card for him, and I signed it, "You are too much, Anna." And I was
because you
like
are too much, as you
7.
should.
I was like 7, so I wrote the wrong 2. I put T-O instead of T-O-O. So yeah, that was 7-year-old me misspelling, but like clearly I didn't understand any of this, and I was astounded when I moved to college and found out that other women were told to smile more because I thought it was just
Yeah.
me. And that's part of the imposter syndrome. Right? You think it's just you, and then you realize everybody else. I
It's
was like,
just you.
it's not just me, it's all of us. And so
It's all of us.
I didn't know at that age that, oh, this is a gender thing or whatever, because he didn't tell my brothers that. I had 4 little
Yeah.
brothers who were with me every time he saw me. It was only me. And I didn't understand any of that, but I was like, what am I gonna write in this man's card?
You are too much.
Signed, sealed, delivered.
But yeah, we hear that so often, right? Like, and I heard that by so much. It's funny. I was at a training. This was at a work environment a couple years ago, and I kind of heard that too in the training session, where the person who was teaching, Tarn, who happened to be a higher up in the organization, turns to me. It's like, "Oh, it must have been so rough to be your teacher, Raquel, like growing up."
I've been told that. Yep.
And
I've
I'm
been
like,
told.
well, maybe you shouldn't be where you are then, if you think that this is hard. If you think that the questions that I'm asking are not, because, for example, right, just I am always, and, I don't know, but like one of the questions where, like, it's law of gravity, is gravity a law, right? And he's trying to prove a point of, like, laws are only things that are like consistently that will never be broken.
Right,
And I'm
versus
like,
gravity theory, even though we know gravity.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I said, I don't think it is, because what are the parameters of that? If I'm in,
Which
like,
is
sorry,
critical.
no. He said, like, would gravity always bring things down? Like, that's what he said. Would always, like, whenever I throw something, would it always go down? I was like, no, because if you go to space, it doesn't. Like, if you're flying at like a specific speed, the law of gravity won't apply. So the objects won't come
Gravity's
down.
weight changes based on where you are in the atmosphere, and yeah.
Yeah. So he's like, well, okay. So with the parameters, I was like, but if you're going to ask a question that is supposed to be an absolute answer,
Right.
you need to give an example that is
And
absolute.
you're not necessarily well, and it doesn't know if you're being a smartass because a lot of times teachers ask you that to say, "No, you should have thought of what if you were on Mars?"
Correct. So I've always learned to, like, think of every possible. I thought that that was the thing. I was like, well,
Right.
not really. But not just that. First of all, I don't like generalizations, and I don't like anything that is absolute, right? Like, if you tell me that every person does this, I'm like, does it? Because I can show at least one or two that don't. Like, you know what I'm saying? So I don't like the generalizations of any kind. So that was a specific topic for me. But, um, sorry, I interrupted you probably.
No, that was it. That was it. That was just something I wanted to say before we close out here, just because one to resonate with you because I know it's a thing, and I know any women who watch this, and hey, even some men, like feel free to share your experience, and just it is funny. I always find it very funny that even with so much change in life, the things that stay the same. And you may not have been a smart ass, but I sure was and still am. So
No, because that's the thing. I thought that I could. My conditioning was that I by me saying something was always me giving the impression that I thought that I was better than other people.
Mhm.
That was my conditioning. So my conditioning was different in the sense of like, I don't say it not because I don't think I'm smart. I don't say it not because I don't think I'm
But I don't wanna
worthy.
make you
I don't say it
uncomfortable.
because I don't want to make you uncomfortable. I don't want to make you look stupid. I don't want to make you silly. I remember this one time, very quick. It's a very quick story. My mom brought me to my mom is a professor. She's a dentist, but she's a professor as well. And she always did all these qualifications. She did all these I have no idea how much specialty she's like very academic, like she really loves that stuff. And I remember one day, I think she picked me up from school, and I ended up going to one of the classes with her. And I was learning English actually because I was reading a book from my English class, so I'm reading it. And I remember the teacher of that class. I was in the class with them, right? And he asked the question. He's like, "Okay, so what is the only thing that would not make this work, right, or something? What is the only number that will make this not work?" And he was dead silence. And I in my little book, and I was just like, "Zero?" And he looked at me, as like, "Yes." I was like, "Yeah," because that makes sense. And the entire class, these are all, you know, adults of like, people that have degrees and whatever.
Never
Everyone just looked
agree.
at me. And I'm like, "I'm sorry, I'm not trying to make feeling, but make any." I don't think they did think that of me, but it's like that was always the reactions I got when I speak up. And when I was wrong, people would make fun of it. It was like, "Oh, she doesn't know." I was like, but it never stopped me from saying it. And the being wrong part never stopped me from saying. What would stop me from saying it was to be right and
Mm,
be seen as the know-it-all, be
right.
seen as the one that's trying to one up everybody. But I would say this to all the women specifically out there, and I know you just turned, I'm not gonna say your age, but I know you just turned age that's younger than me. Let's just say that. I'm gonna be 42 this year. I can tell you this for a fact. At one point, I hope to God that you will no longer feel like this, that you feel like you belong, that you feel like you can say the things that you want to say, because nobody deserves to live like this. It's a sense of freedom, like none, like there's nothing that compares to this, of being able to own your own self, your own smart, your own intelligence, your own beauty, your own whatever stage you are of your life, of your own smart, your own belief in yourself, your own faith in whatever you want to believe. It took me years to be comfortable in saying the things that I say because I was always here. And this is a conversation I had with you the other day, right? Like, I think it was even like on chat, even that the things I believe, a lot of people, I was always afraid to say them because I was afraid of people are going to judge me or think that I live in La La Land or whatever. And then I'm like, why should I worry so much about those things? And eventually, I hope, at least it's the hope of mine, that women will learn this, that it doesn't really matter, that people will say whatever they want to say about you, and you never have any control over it. People can do everything right, and other people that want to say things about you, they will still find a way to fault you for something. So you can never control the narrative of other people. You can only control your own. So sorry, I didn't need to overpass our minutes, but I just want to give
All
you
good. I just was letting someone know I'm almost there. I'm back to back
and we
today.
are we are
But
done.
I agree, and thank you for your inspiration and wisdom. And I know that something I use to cope with being perceived as too much is humor. And that is what we will talk about next week.
And hopefully my computer will drop again in the right time as well as we
Yes.
speak, like we did in the beginning. I can't wait to see the actual recording.
Nice. Okay. Well, thank you for your time and thank you anybody listening. And
Thank you.
we'll talk to y'all next week.
All right. Bye, guys.